simple ground rules for our time together today. Let me get through these. First off, confidential. What is discussed here stays here. We are collaborative, so we engage. Or as Josh says, this is a full contact sport, not a spectator sport. Let's be contextual, so no selling, no politics. Also, nothing is personal. Let's be cordial, so being helpful, supportive, share your time with others, and committed. So commit to yourself and to your peers. Please limit distractions and interruptions while on the call today. If you aren't muted, please mute yourself. If you're like me, I have dogs in my office that like to snore loudly while I work. Could be a sign of how exciting my work is, or maybe they're just tired. So again, welcome. For those of you just joining in, if you would please drop your name, title, company you work for, and where you're located into the chat. Would appreciate that. So today we have the Edgingtons. The Edgingtons will discuss neurodivergence, the definitions and the prevalence in our workforce, and how COOs may need to adapt to the modern workplace. We'll also touch on the imposter syndrome and definitions of such, and differences and solutions to that. May is also Mental Health Awareness Month. That's a holiday in the US that goes back to 1949. We talk about executives and mental health and making sure that we take time to recharge and refresh. And I think today's discussion is going to help fulfill that to a certain degree. So again, very excited to have the Edgingtons with us. So I'll introduce the Edgingtons by just sharing a little bit of their background. And I've known the both of them for about 6 months, and we could probably spend a whole presentation just on their backgrounds. They are amazing, and I would welcome you to go out and to check them out, look them up, connect with them on LinkedIn, get out to the website, learn more about them, because they are just two very dynamic individuals. I'm going to read a brief bio, but there's so much more. Mariah and Byron Edgington are TEDx speakers. They've just come back from a TEDx talk just a few weeks ago, I think, right? Has it been a month already? Maybe just a few weeks. Bestseller authors, keynote speakers, and contributors to Biz Catalyst 360 and Medium Digest. They are evangelists for the idea that everyone's life has value. Their company is Mandate to Elevate LLC, so look that up. And because of their past careers, they are dedicated to lifting people up in more ways than one. Mariah is a retired ICU ER flight nurse. After gaining insight that she's neurodivergent, she now mentors other neurodivergents, giving them tools to live to their fullest potential. Byron is a retired commercial and military helicopter pilot who flew all over the world. He's an award-winning writer and has published numerous books. The Edgingtons co-authored a recent book, Journey Well, You Are More Than Enough, which is a best-selling series. The series includes a guidebook, online course, and gratitude journal, and all are available on their website. We are grateful to Byron and Mariah for spending time with us today, and we look forward to what they have to share. So I will turn it over to them.
Okay, thanks, Chuck, for the wonderful introduction. We are thrilled to be here. Fiona, thank you as well for tending to the details and the housekeeping here. We're really grateful for the opportunity to share this important information. And also, eventually, Laura, we hope. We appreciate all your attention to detail, and we're going to briefly touch, as Chuck mentioned, we're going to just very briefly touch on imposter syndrome and the inner critic. However, I have to mention, in our recent presentations, we found most of the Q&A we field at the end of the session is around neurodiversity and neurodivergence. So today, those two topics will be our main focus. And a lot of the information that we're going to share today comes from the second title of our Journey Well, You Are More Than Enough series. And this one is titled Mindset Matters, and it's available right now on Amazon. A lot of the material comes from those books. And when you leave here today, We hope that you will leave with a better understanding of this timely and important topic, neurodiversity, neurodivergence, how it affects you, how it affects your employees in your workplace, and importantly, how it affects your bottom line.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be stopping frequently to field your questions, as Chuck mentioned. So make sure at any time, feel free to ask us, because we are very open about the neurodivergence subject. I am, as Chuck mentioned, I'm neurodivergent, and the opposite is neurotypical. And I'm not, as being a professional nurse for years, I'm very open to people asking questions. So feel free to do that. And if you wouldn't mind using the electronic hand to do that, it will bring you up to the top of the line and we'll be able to see that better.
Yeah, we don't want to miss anybody. So having said that, we are going to screen share just one time, and we're going to do a fun exercise here just to start things off. I think you'll enjoy.
Yeah.
So let's do that now.
Okay.
And here we go. Now, everybody see that okay? Yes, okay. Here's what I want you to do. Here's the exercise. We're going to put you to work here. Read this phrase, and we want you to count the number of F's that you find in this phrase. Go ahead.
Okay. There we go. So.
Okay, yeah. So how many saw, I mean, we can't see hands from the blanked off screens, but how many saw 3 F's?
And only 3
And
F's.
only 3 F's. Yeah.
Show of hands here.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Good. How many saw 4 F's? Anybody see 4 F's? Yeah, okay. Karen saw 4 F's. Anybody see 5? No. How about 6? Anybody see 6? We'll show it to you again here. Now, we have to confess, when Mariah and I did this exercise a little while ago, we only saw 3 F's. And how many are in there? Actually, there are 6 F's in here.
What is the one we missed?
What's the word we gloss over all the time? Yeah.
The of.
Yeah.
And everybody does a collective groan of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
So, but when we did it, we only found 3 F's. And we started the session this way because when we did it, we felt kind of dumb. And we like everybody to feel the same.
That's not it. These are a bunch of smart people.
Well, they look pretty smart.
Okay. So the reason we do start that way is because it's a perfect analogy of what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to ask you to focus on something right now that you're not typically used to focusing on. I want you to take a few minutes and focus on you. We all come with baggage. There's a lot going on in your business, in your employees' lives, in your life.
Yeah. So once again, we're going to put you to work. We want you to write down 3 questions. I'll give you the questions here in a second. Don't answer them, just write them down. Number 1 question is, why am I here? Okay. Number 2 question, what do I want to take away? Okay. Number 3, what can I bring to others?
Okay, and we talk about mindset, and this is part of it. We'd like you to take the next few minutes to consider these questions.
Yeah.
Why am I here? What do I want to take away? And what can I bring to others? Consider those and then write out a clear answer to each of them. Take just a few minutes and we will come back to you, but take a little bit of time to consider yourself here.
And why am I thinking of the theme from Jeopardy right now? I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry if I missed it. When you say, why am I here?
Why am I here?
In this meeting, in this world, at this job? What?
Yes, that's right.
That's right.
Okay.
Part of it. There is no exact.
Yeah.
And when you stop and think, the first thing that comes to your mind, that's exactly right. Why am I here? What is your purpose? Or why am I here today? Why did I show up? What do I want to take away? And what do I bring to others?
Yeah.
So you're right. Was that Jason who asked that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're exactly
Nice, Jason.
right, because we don't compartmentalize people. We want you to discern which way it is for you today. And there is no such thing as a wrong answer.
No. Okay. Now, if you were to ask your managers or employees, your subordinates, what would they say? Well, first of all, what would they say about having to be here? Some of them might say, well, because I had to be here, I was voluntold you will be at this meeting. Some might say, well, we like learning things. That's a commendable answer, isn't it? Some of them might say, because whatever makes the company better and stronger, that's why we're here. We're going to help. Those are all great answers. Keep in mind that we're here because we made a choice to be here, every one of us. People in jail don't have a choice, but we do.
Right. And so today was your choice, and thank you for making that one.
Yeah.
Each of you have your own agenda, your own goals. We all do. It's your own why, and it's an awareness. So when we think of life as an overall purpose, we think of, okay, goals. What are our goals? Show of hands here. How many of you have goals? Yeah. Okay, keep your hand up if you have them written down.
Yeah.
Great, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, so now, how many of your goals are tied directly to your purpose? And that can be your purpose for why you're working in the job you are, or position you are, or your life purpose. But we encourage people to have goals for their personal life and for their professional life, and directly tie them to your life purpose.
Yeah, because when we begin to consider our why and our intention, that brings a lot more clarity to our day and our life, obviously. And that's part of being aware. That's awareness.
Being present and intentional for life is also a choice.
Yeah.
We have our own expertise and talents, and whether we share that with others, that's a choice. And this is where mindset comes in.
Yeah.
What you focus on expands, good or bad.
So let's talk about imposter syndrome and inner critic. That's also a mindset matter, we think. And we're going to touch on this because it's relevant to the major part of the discussion today, which is neurodiversity and neurodivergence.
Imposter syndrome is defined as an inaccurate view of one's own expertise or skills, feeling like a fraud, especially around personal success and accomplishments, as well as when we compare ourselves to others. And the inner critic is the negative voice we hear in our head telling us negative things that everyone and society has told us for years. It can be relentless. Now, because people frequently ask us, what's the difference? I'm going to share a personal story to illustrate it, because I had both imposter syndrome and inner critic. And this was during one of the most critical points of my life in my career. So for me, as a neurodivergent person, as research has shown, that combination of inner critic and imposter can be ruthless. I was a highly trained, highly successful ER ICU flight nurse. But when I would get out of the helicopter at the rural small hospital to go in to that critical patient I was going to transport, I had the imposter sitting on my shoulder. And honestly, I would hear this nagging voice, the imposter saying, "You're so not good enough to do this job." They're going to say, "They sent you? They must not have had anyone else." And sadly, I believed it. For years, I was so highly trained, but I couldn't see it. However, once I got to my patient, I was laser focused and locked in. I was game on with that patient. I was in a zone because I knew my skill at that moment was exactly matched to what I was doing. And each patient that I took care of got the best care that they could have gotten anywhere. Then after I'd take my patient back to the university, to the intensive care unit, and turn them over to their caregivers there, with my job done, my inner critic stepped in and talked to me about every single thing I did wrong. I was criticized and I heard it over and over and over. So the imposter got me coming towards the patient, and the inner critic, my own voice, took over afterwards. However, things changed. And once I became aware that I had total control of the negative voice in my head, just like each of you do. When we find that we're in total control of what we tell ourselves, well, for me, my life changed. That mindset shift was a game changer. Unfortunately for me, that didn't happen until several years after I retired from the nursing profession. And one of the reasons I speak to people about this is because I want them to know when they're in their highest game, when they are a COO, a CEO, when they are up there at that level, if they're hearing that negative voice, there's a way to shut it off. And it takes mindset tools. But the good news is that now I look back at that amazing nurse that I was, and I am proud of that. I know that this is possible for other people too, to overcome imposter syndrome and inner critic.
Yeah, in our recent TEDx talk in Alpharetta, Georgia, the title was Neurodivergence, a Relationship Superpower. We describe tools and workarounds that we've created as a neurodivergent, neurotypical couple to make our lives better. And after that talk, well, even before the talk, as part of the reason we did it, we knew we had to share these tools to help others. So here's the thing. If you feel like an imposter, you're in good company. A guy named Albert Einstein, you might have heard of Albert Einstein. He was a pretty smart guy. He said sometimes he felt like an involuntary swindler. So if you can help your employees with this by building them up, you become a leader who provides a safe environment for your people. And a safe environment, as we'll see later, is particularly important for neurodivergent employees, as you will see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, quick question. So it's happened to me throughout my career, and I know I've heard it from other COOs, but I grew up believing that knowledge is power, and how a leader kind of shares that knowledge or hoards that knowledge will help shape how the organization behaves.
Yeah.
I wonder, I'm curious from other folks on the call, or if you want to weigh in, but if knowledge is power, I mean, I don't know if that's true, but if it is, could that be where some of the imposter syndrome comes from, in that we feel we have to know everything about being a leader, and so when we get to a leadership role, all of a sudden when we realize we don't, we're like, uh-oh, I might be in the wrong spot.
Yeah, that's so true. We hear that over and over again, Chuck, where people get to a certain level, and that's exactly what happened to me. I was expected. And here's the flip side. The moment I would walk in and I would get to the patient, before I even got there, I would see a look of relief on the faces of the doctors and the nurses there taking care of that patient, because we had arrived and we knew tools and things that we could help that patient. And I feel that's the same way with people who are in executive roles, that they second guess themselves. Yeah. But yet if they lean into their own intuition, the answer is within them. But it's that overarching fear. Does anybody here have ever felt kind of like the Peter principle? We've all heard of that, right? Like, oh my gosh, I've just taken on way too much. They shouldn't have sent me for this job. Is there anybody else here who felt that before?
Yeah, well, and I think it has a lot to do too with setting expectations for ourselves that are just unrealistic. And I don't know how you get past that in a corporate environment, but I think we expect ourselves to be perfect, and there's no such thing. So that's part of it too, I think.
Yeah, Deborah, you want to jump into the conversation?
No, I was actually just trying to raise my hand and I clapped instead, and I was.
Hey, clapping is good. Clapping is.
Yeah, go ahead, Deborah, if you have a question.
Yeah.
No, you asked, had anybody else felt this way? And I was like, oh, me. But then I was like, wait, okay. I was just getting caught up in the emojis.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I've been there, done that, yeah. Okay, so let's see, I guess we were going to ask, oh, I know what it was. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it is true. We just talked a little bit about the imposter syndrome and the inner critic. How many of you have had issues with inner critic yourself, where you tell yourself things that, yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true. We do that. And it's unfortunate
Thanks, Jan.
because we do have our own not best interest at heart
Yeah,
at
sure.
times.
Yeah, well, we're so critical of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've found, and it's interesting, I don't know if any of you have heard this before, but someone once told me, whatever follows I am follows you.
Mhm.
And I've learned that I have to make that positive. And I encourage each of you to do this as well. So instead of dragging yourself down with, oh, so stupid, I can't believe I just did that.
Yeah.
No, tell yourself that you're a very smart person. We wouldn't be in the place you are.
Yeah,
So I am professional. I am confident. I am brave. I'm bold. Just give yourself real positive affirmations. Every time when you start spiraling down, take a minute and just kind of a deep breath. That's mindset. It really is amazing. Things that are that simple can be game changers.
Go ahead, Kat.
Got a
With
question?
imposter syndrome, I've kind of always heard, I get what you're saying, but I've heard it from the opposite side where people think that they have all of the skills, and yet they really don't. So it's that kind of the opposite. Are you addressing that anywhere in there?
Well, no, this is
or
funny
you
that you say that. I
That's very
love that
timely, Kat. Yeah.
because we now know that it's important to remember
Yeah.
that real imposters never have imposter syndrome.
That's right. Think
And
about that.
we've all seen these people who just build themselves up and they're up here. We've worked with some of them, right?
Yeah.
And those people,
Yeah.
they probably,
They could probably benefit from a good dose of imposter syndrome sometime. No,
okay.
that's not
Go
true.
ahead, Corey.
Corey, you're muted, sir.
Yeah, I think it's just really great, and especially how it relates to us. But my wife is extremely neurodivergent, and so I think this is really interesting to me on a personal level. But then I heard a hint there about how you can create a safe work environment for employees who may be neurodivergent. So it's very easy for me to recognize that with my wife because we have those conversations. I hear her work day, how she translates that. I'd be really interested in understanding, like, how do you identify that within an employee where you may not be having those types of conversations that you can see that, pull them out, and then apply any type of, leadership style, that's specific to that employee. But just that identification, I think, would be very difficult. So,
Corey, you and I need to talk.
Okay. So he's not going to mind when I interrupt you.
Oh, see, that's right. Yeah, he's probably used to it. Yeah.
well, my wife is very successful as well, but getting her to understand that is very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this in some detail here later on.
This is a perfect bridge because we're heading back.
Spit it out.
We're heading right into neurodivergence right
Yeah,
now.
we
So
are.
thank you for that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, your wife and Mariah are in really good company because Albert Einstein had it. Tom Hanks, Barbara Streisand used to get deathly ill before every performance because she had such powerful imposter syndrome.
And
And as for the inner critic, here's an interesting little anecdote. Ariana Huffington, who is the CEO of Thrive Global, she even has a name for her inner critic. She calls it the obnoxious roommate living in my attic.
We've all dealt with
Yeah.
that obnoxious roommate,
Yeah.
haven't we?
Yeah. So let's get on to neurodivergent. Here's a quick story. I want you to visualize this. You come into the office, you plug in your laptop to do some work, and you're tapping along. You remember, oh, I've got to buy a present for my niece who loves everything Little Mermaid. So you get online and you order her something for her birthday. You just benefited from neurodivergent creativity 3 times in a row How'd you do that? Well, think about the way electricity gets from the street into your office, into your computer. That circuit is largely because of a guy named Nikola Tesla, isn't it? The computer itself. Mr. Alan Turing was a big name in early computers. And then we think about the Little Mermaid. We think about the Ugly Duckling, the Emperor's New Clothes, the Princess and the Pea. Those wonderful stories came to us from a fellow named Hans Christian Andersen. So what do those three people have in common? They were all neurodivergent. Yeah.
Welcome to my world of neurodivergence. I am neurodivergent. And until recently, though, I hadn't shared it publicly. I hadn't talked about it because I was too embarrassed. I've always known I was different. I didn't read until I was in 4th grade. As a kid, I was regularly bullied. As a matter of fact, when I was little, I fit in, and even in high school, I fit in lockers, and I would go around a corner and be grabbed and tossed into a locker. And the kids would laugh and say, that weirdo deserves to be in there. And I know there's people out there still who are bullied because we just don't understand social cues. And I knew those kids were right, that I was crazy, dumb, and stupid. And as I mentioned before, I carried those harsh words with me for decades. So if this is you, or if it's someone you're close to,
An employee.
yeah, I empathize. But it could be one of your employees.
Mhm.
My managers never knew. And I was an expert at what they call neuromasking, which we'll talk about. However, last year, I realized I had a responsibility to talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of which, if I can dive in here for just a second, Mariah may not have read until she was in 4th grade. Now she writes books. So, let's not give up on these folks because there's a lot of benefits. And we all know how important company culture is. Imagine knowing as an employee that you're just tolerated.
Thank you very much.
Wrong. Okay.
Thank you.
Michelle,
Thank you.
People who don't feel like they don't belong. That's the way Mariah often felt. So think about that. How many of you think that particular scenario negatively affects the workplace in terms of productivity and morale? Yeah, of course it does.
Yeah, that's right. And you're welcome anytime you have a question or a comment. Please feel free to jump in because, quite frankly, I do too. I jump in all the time.
No comment. No comment.
Impulsivity is one of the things that I still, even though I've learned with a lot of mindset tools to kind of back things up and just really be a better listener. Part of neurodivergence is the impulsivity, and I still get to work with that. Here's the thing though, if a neurodivergent person is in your workforce, they could be an excellent employee if they were placed in the correct position for their talent, just like I was as a critical care flight nurse.
Yeah, it's very, very important. And we're going to share part of an article right now that came from the Harvard Business Review. And what the Harvard Business Review did, they've put together a composite neurodivergent employee.
Oh, by the way.
Are you what? That's an interruption. I can't believe.
I wanted to let you know that I created a bibliography with all of these resources as a reference here today, and I'll have Fiona and Laura share that with you too.
Yeah, we appreciate that. So here's our composite guy. We'll call him John. John is a wizard at data analytics. His combination of mathematical ability and software development are unusually incredible, astonishing. John's CV features not one but 2 master's degrees, both with honors. He's an obvious guy for a tech company to snap up and hire, right? Well, until recently, no. Now, before John ran across a firm that had begun experimenting with alternative approaches to talent, hopefully some of your companies or all of them, he couldn't get through the interview process. He was unemployed for more than 2 years. So if you watch John, you'd see why. He was different. He wears headphones all the time, for one thing. When people talk to him, John can't look them right in the eye. He leans over every 10 minutes to tie his shoelaces because when they're loose, he can't concentrate. When they're tight, though, as Mariah said, John is the department's most productive employee. He's so hardworking, this guy will turn out the lights at night when he leaves. He never wants to take a break, although his assigned workplace buddy, and we'll talk about workplace buddies later on, his buddy has finally persuaded John, take a break. And John takes a break, but he doesn't enjoy it.
We neurodivergents have behaviors that normal people call weird. Now, let me say a little bit about normal and different. In the neurodiversity research that's done worldwide, it's thought that 80% of people are neurotypical or normal. And then the other 20% of us are neurodivergent. And so this is one of the reasons that we typically, and I know for me for a fact, and this is a good place to say that we are not mental health professionals, or we are not DEI credentialed. We are speaking because we have navigated this for over 20 years.
Just like Corey and his wife are doing.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we want you to know that many people of that 80% don't necessarily understand us 20% while we're trying to fit in.
Yeah. So according to a Danish company, you might have heard it, a Danish company called Specialisterne, which just means specialists in Danish. They used to be a software development company. Now they're a corporate consulting business. And one of their clients is JP Morgan Chase. And according to Specialisterne, JP Morgan has reported that particularly autistic professionals, they can be up to 140% more productive than the typical employee, 140% more productive when they're well matched to their job.
Well, neurodiversity, that seems like a term that has just come up with DEI and everything. Is it new?
No, it's not new. Of course it's not. Actually, it's emerging now. You might wonder why all of a sudden neurodiversity and neurodivergence, because it's entering into the DEI workspace, the diversity, equity, inclusion space. All you companies have a diversity training regimen of some kind, I trust. Yeah. Anyway, that's neurodivergence is starting to make its way into the DEI training workspace.
Yeah. What is the incidence of DEI training? Is it required for your companies? Let's see if we have anybody who can jump into that.
Jen is nodding yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Good. I'm
So-
glad to hear that. So, and actually the term neurodiversity and the neurodivergent movement into the DEI space is relatively new, but the term neurodivergent is not. It came about 25 years ago. In 1998, isn't that weird? 1998 was 25 years ago.
Can't
I
think
know.
of it. Yeah.
Get to this age.
I have no earthly idea.
Well,
We hope.
at any rate, Judy Singer, an Australian sociologist, was doing her thesis, and she coined the term neurodiversity as a non-medical term that is an umbrella for many different things. And we're going to talk briefly about what some of those are here.
Yeah, and let's get into some important definitions. This is probably a good time to do this. According to the Cleveland Clinic says a term, neurodiversity is a term used to explain the unique ways people's brains work. Now, everybody's brain develops similarly, but no two brains function alike. And being neurodivergent means having a brain that works differently from the average or neurotypical person.
Right. And so looking at it from my view, according to Princeton University, identifying as neurodivergent means having a mind that functions in ways that diverge significantly from dominant societal standards of normal. When I first read this slide, I was offended, but it's actually true. And the more I've learned about neurodiversity and neurodivergent, it helped me to realize this is why I've had so many challenges all my life. And I think it can be looked at two ways. So first of all, if you are personally identifying with some of these neurodivergent traits that we get into and you haven't looked at it, could be a good time to do that. Or if you know someone or have an employee that you're thinking, yeah, they've always been different, I wonder. This is a good information for you to find out.
Yeah. Now, another term that you might hear, it's starting to make its way into the discussion, and we just heard about this term, neurosignature. Neurosignature, they're interchangeable with neurodiversity, neurosignature. And we just came across this in a book that we highly recommend, by the way, a book titled The Brain-Friendly Workplace, written by a German author named Frederica Fabricius. And that book will be in the bibliography as well, The Brain-Friendly Workplace.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what is under that neurodivergent or umbrella?
Yeah.
There are several, and actually there's more coming under the umbrella all the time. And the typical or the common theme is neuro. And there are diagnoses that you'll see also added to it, but the ones we're going to identify here or define are autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and interestingly, I didn't realize this until we started digging into it, but there are 3 more labels: dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and dyspraxia. And it's common for people with one of the autism or ADHD to have some of these dys ones as well. So let's talk about those so we can kind of, does anybody have questions before we go into that? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good.
All right. So
Yeah. So let's define autism. Autism is a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills like speech, nonverbal communication, and repetitive behaviors. You might hear people talk about stimming, and stimming is shorthand for stimulating. Autistic people very commonly have tics. They'll tap their foot all the time. They can't stop, or they'll tap a pencil, or they might have an expression they keep saying over and over and over again. That's called stimming.
yeah, and this is one of the reasons the stimming behaviors, they are now thinking Tourette's fits underneath this as well.
Yeah.
ADHD, okay. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it can be looked at as a misnomer because if we have something that we are really interested in, our focus is laser-like.
Yeah.
But the inattention comes when we're not matched to the right job. Then we may be all over the board because we're not interested in it. And this is a common thing you hear teachers talk about too. So.
Yeah. Dyscalculia, what the heck is that? It affects understanding simple number concepts, number facts and procedures and systems. And dyscalculia also is trouble discerning right and left. And it obviously poses navigation challenges. And guess how we discovered that?
Well,
Yeah.
early on, we would be driving along and he would say, turn left, and I would go right.
No,
So
your other left.
we didn't know, I didn't know this until it was posed as that way. And now that I found out about dyscalculia, I went, oh, that fits. So,
That's right.
and dysgraphia, another interesting term. It's about the way our ability to, what do I want to say? The writing is impaired. So my ability to spell and write in a consistent way, for example, I will start printing a word and I'll finish in cursive, or the other way around. And I've done this all my life. I didn't realize it because of my dyslexia and all these other dys things. This is why I didn't read until I was in 4th grade. And then once I learned tools, this is the thing. It's when you can bring tools to people, it helps them to get into the right position and they can do things that they would have not been able to do before.
Like become a published author, for example. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
if I can jump in real quick, because
Please.
this really has me thinking, and this is for our audience out there, so pay attention to the question. But I'm curious, is there anyone out there that has acknowledged the challenges of interviewing, neurodivergent
Yeah, good
potential
question.
employees? And have you put any strategies in place to accommodate for a better interview process? I wonder, because I wonder how often we're missing out on great talent because we've grown up interviewing it in a certain way.
Yeah, good question.
Any thoughts out there?
I want
There's
to
a
share.
prize for whoever goes first. Josh?
Yeah, I'll step in actually, because one of the things that I've used is I've seen drastic differences between writing styles and the way that people interview. So that's something that I'd take into consideration when interviewing somebody, because I mean, it's different than somebody just coming in and being nervous, right? Because you can pick up on those cues. But if somebody truly has a challenge communicating in real time, to me, that's the side of it that's difficult to pick up, right? You try to break through is this just nerves, or is it something that they're bringing with them? And a lot of times you can kind of flush that out a little bit by just asking them to write and giving them more time. Not everybody's willing in an interview process to do that, which, is obviously a disservice to the interviewee. I think that's a bit of a breakdown in the process in a lot of ways, because how many of those folks that would actually be rock stars are, one, not even given the opportunity to show that they can be rock stars, and two, are not given any feedback saying why the answer was no, right? Like, to me, those are two massive disservices.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Anyone else that has changed their interview process recently to account for neurodiversity? I'm just curious. I want to find a best practice out there that we could post out onto our e-forum.
I haven't changed it, but now that we're talking about this, I remember specifically commenting people not making eye contact we're doing Zoom now and stuff, but I remember multiple times where people are kind of looking down, but we have enough people interviewing. So I've acknowledged it, but I make a point not to hold it against them. But now that we're saying this, I'm like, oh, so it's helpful. And no, we don't really you're right. We don't bring that in. We accommodate for a lot of like other things, but we don't really bring them. It's eye-opening. So I am going to bring that back to my team to, hey, how can we make sure that people are paying attention from this aspect of the diversity?
Well, and that's a good question or comment, Kat. But I remember not hiring people because they didn't have good eye contact. That's how I grew up interviewing. If they don't have a good handshake, if they don't have good eye contact, they aren't going to be a good fit. And I just wonder what a disservice we've done over these years. Go ahead.
Let me just interject this.
Sure.
That was probably not the wrong call, because they would not have fit into your culture then.
Yeah.
Because the culture did not have the structure that we have now. No one knew this. I didn't know I was neurodivergent, honestly, not till the last recent few years.
Yeah.
But now that I do, and that's why I feel I have the responsibility to talk about this. So let's build the infrastructure to support them. And we're going to get into talking about these buddies. We just learned about it when been doing this research.
Yeah.
That is huge, because if I feel like I am not welcome, I am scared and I will not fit in.
Yeah.
I will just go back and cower, and everybody else will be, remember, 80%, 20%, right? So everybody else is going to go, oh my God, look at them, they're a weirdo.
Yeah.
Well, of course we were, because we don't get social cues. And I'm using a broad brush when I say we. I mean me and many of my neurodivergent people. And this man here has just been super supportive, and it's given me the courage to come out and speak to people and say, it's okay if you're different.
I wonder how many people on the call could actually forego interviewing 20% of our population. Like, we don't have that luxury. So I guess we have to think about that and change it. And Deborah, did you have your hand up, or were you clapping again?
No, actually, just my daughter is dating a neurodivergent gentleman, and it is so interesting to hear what you're saying and applying it to this person. And I know that she had to read up on what it was going to be like to be in partnership with this person. And I'm thinking how important it is for everyone to read up on this. And hopefully we'll all get your book and be able to figure that out. Hiring and talent acquisition folks need to know about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the book, we don't specifically talk about neurodivergence. That book is actually coming out in the fall.
Yeah.
But
Gotcha. Okay.
but we do talk a lot about mindset, and
Yeah.
there's a company that's
Yeah, that's Danish company that we
Yeah.
referred to earlier, Specialist Stern. One of the hallmarks of that company is they hire only neurodivergent people.
and so they are masters with it, and
Yeah.
that's in the bibliography. I highly recommend everybody look up
Yeah.
that.
A lot of
Information.
resources on that, on their website. So, yeah,
Okay, shall we go on?
sure.
Okay.
Thanks for all the questions. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay, did we talk about dyspraxia?
We talked about, no, I guess we didn't. Dyspraxia is the physical aspects of neurodivergence. Often some folks will have difficulty in balance, coordination, fine and gross motor skills, and doing multi-step tasks. Simple things like tying your shoes, sometimes that comes out.
And then dyslexia, and that one's a common one. Most people know about dyslexia, but what dyslexia is characterized with difficulties with accurate or fluent word recognition, poor spelling and decoding abilities. Now, I want to share that if you know someone who is dyslexic, and I've been using this for many years, there is an open dyslexic font. And it was first available on e-readers, and now it's available on browsers. It's called Open Dyslexia Font.
Yeah.
And what happens is people who studied dyslexia know that we see things. For example, I always see the letter I before E. It doesn't matter what the word is. That's the way my brain processes it. And it's not uncommon that I will say words in the incorrect order that they're down on the page because I see them differently. And if you get this open dyslexic font, they weight the letters. So for example, an E on the very bottom of it would be darker.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to look at that font, but it is very helpful. And if you know someone who is dyslexic, they can look into that.
So how does that translate to real life, either in a home setting or the workplace setting? I'm going to refer back to our TEDx talk. We talked about this in Alpharetta when we did our TEDx. And I'll repeat the title of the talk. It was Neurodivergence, a Relationship Superpower. And we talked about some of the ways we interact and how we navigate those differences. And I have to tell you, number one, it's quite an adventure, as Corey will attest. And number two, one of the things that we try to emphasize in our talk and elsewhere and what we do and every place we speak is that we have to start looking at neurodivergence and differences, not as deficits, but as benefits. And once we can get to that point, there's just the world opens up for a lot of people. And that 20%, that's a lot of folks, as Chuck said. So what are the traits? Let's discuss some of these traits.
Typical.
As a neurotypical person, disgustingly normal, I am very linear. I do A, then I do B, then I do C, and that's how I get through my day.
That's spell linear, right? So I am so random. I will go from one thing to another. And for example, when we were writing our first book, it's Journey While You Are More Than Enough, Rediscover Your Purpose.
Passion, purpose, and love of yourself. And speaking of random.
Okay, that's random, but here's the point. When we were doing our fourth edit on this book, and we got to chapter 2, I realized there was something in chapter 8 that needed to go back here in 2. And so I said, wait, we need to stop and put this. I tweak things because I obsess over the most minor details, and you may have an employee just like that. And if you get them into the right position, they are going to increase your ROI and your bottom line like you wouldn't believe. But if they're not engaged, it's a problem.
Next is I'm a do it and go kind of guy. I tend to be a little impatient. I put the words on the page, I put the chapter in the book, I send it to the editor, I get it back and make corrections, I send it to the publisher, done.
Oh, well,
Well.
that's not always good. But anyway, so you get the idea. You may have somebody in your business that your relationship could improve if you were able to work with them a little more openly.
Yeah. Okay, then the next trait that is different between us. Now, I'm not advocating that people lie to each other. You know, lying, nobody likes anybody who lies all the time. But white lies are okay with me. I'm just acknowledging that we're all human. You know, and some of that is just simple courtesy. Somebody comes up to me and says, "What do you think of my new tie?"
Oh, that's ugly.
You know, and I might be thinking, you know, well, what dumpster did you get that from? But 90% of us are going to say, "Oh, that's a great tie you got there." Well,
No, actually, that's 80% because
oh,
the other
80%, that's right.
20% of us
I
are
stand corrected. Yeah.
Gosh.
Where'd you get?
However, there is some, and Corey, you might be able to relate to this. You can be kind of the cushion. Now I look at Byron for his answer when someone says, "Do you like my new hairdo?" And it's really unique. And he says, "Oh, that's nice." I now know that that's nice is the socially adequate response and not telling the truth. Now, that is a typical thing that a neurodivergent person might do. They might be brutally honest.
Yeah.
So if you need someone, you're doing a project on something and you really need somebody to say, "Is this really going to work?" or "What do you think of this?" Ask someone who's different. "What do you think?" Because they're going to tell you.
Yeah, that's right. And again, moving on, I'm a very realistic person. I'll look at something, I'll make a judgment about that, whatever it is, based on my life experience, what I see in front of me, and my perceptions. And that's how I make my decisions. I'm not the least bit woo-woo about things.
Sometimes I am. I'm pathologically optimistic and intuitive. So I tend to see things like I feel them. And so if I feel like something is really great, I'll be very expressive about it. But if I feel like something isn't quite right, or I'm not safe, I intuit things and I mask. If I feel I'm in an unsafe place, or if I'm not certain about things, I'll just try to blend in. And that's because we're in a neurotypical world, us neurodivergents.
Yeah.
So what does that mean even?
Neurodivergent masking. You might have heard this term. It's also called camouflaging. And it's a common practice for neurodivergent people in any setting where they feel they may be singled out, mistreated, bullied, abused. And since they live in a neurotypical world, feeling at least a little bit unsafe is part of their daily experience. And that's where the masking comes from.
Yeah. So why do we mask? As a neurodivergent, I masked for years because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to feel like I was like everybody else. And now I know that my brain's wired different. This is why I don't fit in. And now I'm okay with that. I was really okay when we went to the pandemic and I got to stay home and work in front of my computer, because this is my comfort zone. And if you can find for your employees something that works for them, how many of you are still virtual?
Yeah. Is there a combination, or what's the ratio basically these days? Anybody?
Yeah, well, I know from the COO forum perspective, post COVID, we are probably 80% virtual from a forum perspective. Okay. Yeah. Whereas I think before my time, but here at the COO forum, but we were probably majority in person. Now we've kind of gone virtual due to COVID, and then most of us have stayed that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, this is another question for the group. Do you know of if you have employees that are different, or feel like, has anybody had a neurodivergent employee that you actually know about?
Yeah.
We'll give everyone a few seconds to think about that. I think we could probably all raise our hands.
Yeah.
I work in a software company in Silicon Valley. I rest my case.
Do you have any that are neurotypical there?
It's exactly with what you're talking about, though, is because you look at it, it's like when they get super focused on it, it's a high complicated software development, what they can produce, and they get in the zone. It's just like, okay, no, but it's not, I love what you guys are discussing and doing, because it's making it more normal, and it's not considered socially normal, and we're starting to be able to normalize it, but it's still not talked about in the workplace.
Yeah. So Kat, I have to ask you, are there any neurotypical folks in the Valley?
Exactly.
I'm kidding. You don't have to answer that.
No, but
I'd be curious for the group too. We've had in manufacturing, you've got your different departments, and we'd always have a technical department where we would a chemist that we would just call the mad scientist, and they
Sure.
might have been socially awkward and they just kept to themselves. They were a poor team player because we couldn't get ideas out of them in the meetings, in the group setting. They just wanted to be off in the chemistry lab doing their own thing. And I just wonder where we might have been missing opportunity there. And if other folks have had that mad scientist working for them.
Yeah, that's right. And as you're mentioning that, you're using that term, Chuck, it reminds me of, I don't know how many of you have seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, but it's, Curry saw it, about a fellow named John Nash. And Mr. Nash was at Princeton, and he was called the wizard, or the ghost of Fine Hall. He used to wander around Fine Hall because that was his safe space. And nobody knew what to do with this guy because his mind was just so far out there. Yeah.
So one of the things we're really hoping to do is, because I'm neurodivergent and Byron's neurotypical, we're hoping that our voice somehow is able to elevate people into a safe space, to know that they can provide this for their employees. Because once and you'll see this, I believe that this buddy system is fabulous, because I know personally, because I have a safe space, and it's a game changer, quite frankly. And I think if you had that scientist you talked about, Chuck, if he would have had a buddy who he could confide in, that buddy can bring him into the norm. And then he might feel like, okay, maybe I can say something, or maybe I won't, but my buddy will bring me along. Yeah. So it's a great concept, and I appreciate you guys' input, because this is very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so that now we know that I mask because of fear. I want to fit in. Quite simply, I just don't know the rules. And he could explain them to me, and you guys could explain them to me until you're blue in the face. But I still don't get it. I don't have that processing. And that was always a problem. So I defaulted forever to knowing that I was wrong.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that's very difficult to look at now. And I don't want that for anybody else. And that's why I'm here sharing it. I think it's important that we all understand that not all people who are neurodivergent will share that they're neurodivergent. I'm way out there on the limb here saying that I am. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
Feels like coming out, I guess.
But I feel accepted here, because when I look around at your faces that are on the screen, you know what? I know that you want my success. And if I can come to the world thinking that I am adding benefit, imagine if you have an employee who is different. And they're not going to say that, but if you made them feel included just by letting them know that they're safe and it's okay to be who they are, it's culture changing.
It is culture changing. And that might be a good place to mention too, as we mentioned in our TEDx, this stuff is not easy. It takes a lot of patience, because it's too easy sometimes to just really be frustrated and really irritated with folks. And it works both ways, of course.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, that's kind of a disclaimer. This is not something you just learn overnight. So, and let's refer to something that Laura put out a document from the Sloan Management Review just recently that you might all have gotten. And in the SMR, they say neurodivergent community, they do object to the characteristics being framed as disorders or disabilities or differences or diseases. Also, again, according to the SMR, a strategy we talked about a little earlier called job crafting. to put people in their right, put the round peg in the round hole. Job crafting can be co-designed by the employer and the employee, and that will maximize the employee's strengths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we look at unemployment and underemployment.
Yeah, underemployment and unemployment. Here's some interesting numbers for you. Despite the DEI focus in hiring, the training that goes on, the neurodivergent group still remains behind. In fact, according to Deloitte Insights, an estimated 85% of people on the autism spectrum, for example, are unemployed or underemployed. 85%, compared to 4.2% of the overall population.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to see that change as we move on. But there are a lot of considerations. And if you are in the office, things that could bother neurodivergent people are the lights. If the lights are flickering or glaring, I know that bothers probably everybody, but we can be sensitive to very unusual things. Sounds can bother us. For me, Byron has an office that's upstairs and there's a lot of distractions. For me, I'm in a little cubby and that makes it easier for me to concentrate. Space, if it's an open floor plan, that doesn't always work. That's why John wore the headphones.
That's why John wore his headphones. That's right.
Different odors like perfumes or colognes.
Cologne.
Is it right? Okay, see.
Perfume.
Okay, and I just shared with you unintentionally, as having the dyslexia and the dysgraphia and things like that, there are words that will trip me up. And if I get caught up on a word, I will stop, and then it'll make me come back and be afraid to speak again because I'm afraid of making a mistake. And that's why it's really helpful to know that I'm in a friendly group here. I feel your warmth. I feel you want me to succeed. And if I don't feel that, I'm going to stop talking and just cower back. And that is no, I'm a lot of fun, really, when I'm in a group I trust.
Yeah.
So those are things that could be workplace conditions that we want to look at, considerations.
And so what are the benefits of a more neurodiverse team? Well, I mean, some of these are too intuitive. Some are more very obvious. Enhanced creativity makes perfect sense. You got more perspectives, more ways, more eyeballs on a project, and different ones. You're going to have more creativity. You're also going to have more productivity. You're going to have an improved reputation in the marketplace. The public, I would think that, I'm guessing all of your companies, you're very sensitive to what your public image and your brand.
That. So how many of you are looking at how your image is in and around DEI these days? Is this important?
Yeah. Jen says so. Yeah. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, Corey, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to Google these things these days. So if a company is sensitive to these things, they're going to have a better reputation in the marketplace. And that is extended to the global marketplace because you'll have better marketing opportunities if that's true.
Yeah.
Well, neurodiversity and the bottom line, your ROI. This is important because we know that if you can have these people, meaning me, neurodivergents who fit into your company and do an amazing job, it's a Thrive Global study that says hiring those who think differently, companies in the top quartile for diversity hiring are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors financially.
That's a lot.
Go ahead, Corey.
So I just had a question. One, well, it's actually several. One, do neurodivergent individuals know, or as the coin term is, identify as neurodivergent? And then two, once you've hired someone and you've identified neurodivergency, how do you navigate that if they're in a position that maybe they're not going to be successful at? Like, they may be successful in certain things, but how do you navigate having that conversation? Like, hey, I know you applied for this job, we gave you this job, but you're not performing in this job the way you should. However, here's another position that maybe you would be successful at, like without insulting them.
Right. Good
Because there's a
question.
huge onus. It sounds like there's a huge onus on the employer to try to navigate that, but at the same time, not be insulting, especially because this sounds like something I need to get with my HR team about including in our training now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really great question, because as a neurodivergent, I never knew I was neurodivergent. Well, first of all, when I was in flying and that, it really wasn't even on the radar for people. So, but I always knew, and so did the people working with me, that I was different, right? We all know people who are different. The person you go in your coffee shop, the person at the gas station, these different, we know they're different, but they may not know that they're neurodivergent. And finding out that information, Corey, it was a nightmare for me for several weeks. It sent me in a tailspin personally, because I had to get my mind around, oh my gosh, yeah, I knew I was crazy, dumb, and stupid, but no, I'm not. I'm okay for my brain. This is great information. So that those two things can happen. Now, that said, the person who is different and doesn't have a diagnosis of neurodivergence, even though they probably are, can be matched up with a job if you can do it politically correctly, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And that is a good opportunity to roll out something with the buddy plan and pair them up in a non-threatening way with somebody in a new area. If you did know that they would be good at doing this over here and not where they are, if you could have somebody come over there where they'd be going, pair up with them and train them. We do have some statistics here that are pretty impressive about how our perception of what we are doing. And I'm looking at everybody here. Can you even imagine thinking that your value was not good because you perceived yourself as being not good enough? We've all been there. It's not a good feeling.
Oh, and it's got to affect your ROI.
It sure does. So these are great questions.
Great question.
And
Thanks, Corey.
I would definitely look into that. What's it
Yeah,
called again?
the buddy system.
No,
Yeah.
that list.
Oh, specialist training.
Specialist
Yeah,
training.
sure. Yeah.
They
check out
have
the-
sources for you.
Yeah.
So
I
it's a
thought
great.
Laura had a question. No. Okay. All right. So creating a culture for success. Let's talk about this, because this kind of addresses Corey's question. Mentorship. It's important for all people, for all employees. But as we mentioned a number of times, creating a workplace buddy system for neurodivergence helps them integrate into the role. According to the SMR, again, training for neurodivergent employees should be in multiple formats, so it's available in a way that plays to their strengths and suits them best.
Yeah, and that's true, especially with the younger generation coming up. We all know that they don't read as much. They do a lot of video games and a lot of visual stuff, and that is a different format that might benefit people.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
Microsoft,
and this comes from the Harvard Business Review. Microsoft found the more the onboarding, or faster, I should say, the faster the onboarding buddy met. Let me start over. Microsoft found that the more the onboarding buddy met with the new hire, the faster the new hire's perception of their own speed up to productivity went, up to 97% more when meeting 8 or more times with their buddy in the first 90 days of employment.
so that's a good statistic there for you, Corey, is that the 97% more means how that person perceived their own acceptance and their own understanding of the job. So when we look at people who are different and maybe failing in one area, wouldn't it be great not to have to let them go and lay them off? If you have another job over here that you look at it from the outside and go, oh my God, that'd be a perfect match because they're going to be laser focused on this, and see if you can work with them, because we all know what it costs to onboard somebody. And if they're going to be a good employee.
Yeah, and as I said, it's not easy. It can be really frustrating at times. So, but it's worth it. Plus, for current employees, here's another benefit. For current employees, serving as an onboarding buddy provides an opportunity to demonstrate managerial and leadership skills. And that, again, is from the Harvard Business Review.
Now, one thing I can say about that and these onboarding buddies, and the reason I have taken to that is because personally, I know how important it is for me, or was when I was working in the workforce, to feel included. And if I had somebody who was from the inside, from the 80%, who was my safe place, because I could go to them and I could say, and in nursing, you always had a mentor. And ironically, looking back, it was typical that a neurotypical person got a neurodivergent person. And I don't know whether that was just, I'm sure it must have been by happenstance. But the point is, I had someone who was on the inside that I could turn to, and they would bring me in, even if it was just in the slightest way. It helped me be in the culture. And that's the thing. We all know what culture is, so that's an important thing.
Yeah.
So with workplace tips and things that could help is if you have to have that conversation, Corey, with somebody, you have to make them feel comfortable, first of all, and not threatened. And one way to do that, as we all know, this is just good communication, is asking those open-ended questions. And even though they may not be looking at you, they might look at their shoes or up at the ceiling or something like that. You have to be paying attention to them so that when they glance at you, they notice that, okay, you're still engaged here. It makes a world of difference. So I guess if I can say anything about this discussion and neurotypical versus neurodivergent, I would say, and I'm sure you've heard this, that it's safety for me.
Yeah.
That's a really big thing, and how to incorporate us in with your culture is big. So
Yeah.
keep in mind another aspect of that. On the flip side, say I am in a good job and I did a fabulous job in a project, and you want to celebrate that, right? Because you're a good manager and you're a leader and you want everybody to know. Well, ask the neurodivergent employee first, because I don't like people calling out my successes. I know that might seem counterintuitive, but the thing is that in my brain, for some reason, I feel like if I am successful, I might be pushed away from the circle even further instead of pulled in.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy, kind of ludicrous, right? But always ask before you announce somebody's success publicly. Another part of that is, if you want to have a discussion with somebody, or they want to have a discussion with you about what they feel their differences are, or that they're neurodivergent, make sure that you get their permission to be speaking to them in that way. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive too, because if we've already kind of opened that, but just to be on the safe side, just always ask open-ended questions and include them in that.
Yeah. Okay. So here's another number for you. And this is very interesting. This is a big number. Neurodivergent workers and the benefit to your organization. Now, this came from Ernst & Young, and they're talking about their client base. They have secured $1 billion plus in ROI and saved 3.5 million hours based on solutions created by their neurodivergent talent. That's 1 billion with a B. But think of it this way. When we think about unlocking the value of neurodiversity, the most important thing is we're unlocking value for people, isn't it? And that, by the way, that statistic and those numbers came from Text Help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we are bumping up against time here. So in summary, we just like to, first of all, thank you guys, Chuck and Laura and Fiona. Thank you so much. And everyone here who's participated. But hiring neurodivergent people can bring new creativity to your workplace.
So, and creating that buddy system, that's an excellent initiative. And also the job crafting we talked about for new hires. Those are all great things.
Yeah, and maintain that safe environment for people so that they do feel included.
Yeah, and that all provides support for your neurodivergent and or different employees and for your other employees, of course.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for if you've found value in our presentation, we're happy to speak to your people as well, or your board of directors, or if anyone you know could benefit from this. We do 15 to 30 minute Zoom. I even stopped talking, so it's shorter. Presentations too, and we'd love to work with you.
We would love to, yeah. And
If Fiona could put our
yeah,
link in.
Fiona, if you'd be so kind as to put a link to our Calendly
And our website
in the
too.
website,